BBOR Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia at heart and from around the globe. And hello everybody, today is Friday, another Cooper Friday. Welcome to the show. How's everybody doing? On Fridays this year, I've been talking to you guys about D.B. Cooper, the man responsible for the only unsolved skyjacking in U.S. aviation history. D.B. Cooper boarded a plane in 1971, using the name Dan Cooper, actually. D.B. Cooper was a name that was falsely given to him by the media. He held the crew and passengers hostage on board and demanded $200,000 as ransom and 4 parachutes. Then D.B. Cooper parachuted into the night, never to have been seen or heard from again. To the best of our knowledge, some people, of course, claim that they've identified D.B. Cooper and that they have extracted the confessions, or the confessions have been written down and they know where they are, or that D.B. Cooper sent taunting letters, but it's all part of the mystery. And in this episode, I will be talking about the D.B. Cooper suspect E. Howard Hunt. Now, I release short episodes here on Black Box Online Radio. They're also available on Facebook and Instagram. My personal Facebook is Ned DeHaan. It's in the description box. And then there is BlackBoxNed88 over on Instagram. And there are only 2 D.B. Cooper suspects that I've talked about in the short series. One of them is E. Howard Hunt, and the other one is John Emil List. And the reason why is because I run a true crime channel and I've encountered these names a lot. Both of them are no stranger to Black Box Online Radio, and I have a standalone episode about E. Howard Hunt discussing the book Bond of Secrecy that was written by his son, St. John Hunt, and it talks all about E. Howard Hunt's time with the CIA. He was a real-life CIA spy. I think that's the way that we can label him. But I'd like to give a shout out to Dave, who sent this into the Black Box Online Radio Facebook page. In addition to my Facebook, you can also just follow BBOR over on Facebook under the name Black Box Online Radio. And Dave had a response to last week's Cooper Friday. Thank you so much for the recent YouTube video on the D.B. Cooper sketches. In my opinion, you left out a suspect who by far resembles the Bing sketch more than any other. That is the former OSS agent, Bay of Pigs co-architect, Watergate co-conspirator, E. Howard Hunt. He may qualify as one of the most outlandish suspects, but besides being trained to covertly jump from airplanes dressed in a suit and tie at night by the military, having explosives and dynamite training, a thirst for money, and in 1971, he may have had a James Bond complex, a CIA background, and a history of performing criminal operations during long holiday weekends. He had friends in high places who might have been able to protect him. Anyway, that's my piece, and attached is a photo of E. Howard Hunt from 1977, side by side with the only sketch done by a sketch artist who had the 3 stewardesses in the same room with him 2 days after the event. And with the photo that was shared to me by Dave, I am forced to admit that there is a very strong resemblance between E. Howard Hunt and the proposed sketch. The problem is, though, as I was saying last week on Cooper Friday, there are multiple sketches. One of them, the one that he's talking about, the Bing sketch, has an extremely narrow nose. Another one has a wider nose, that's Composite B. And then Composite C, the one that was created from the memories of Florence Schaffner for a TV show in the 1980s, looks absolutely different. It has an extremely receding hairline with a much larger nose, almost forming into a widow's peak with the hair, and very, very different all around. So firstly, this doesn't prove anything. It's not like hook, line, and sinker. Okay, E. Howard Hunt was D.B. Cooper. That's a striking resemblance, so therefore he was D.B. Cooper. And I think the reason why I chose to do that particular short episode was I was just surprised that somebody as famous as E. Howard Hunt was a real D.B. Cooper suspect. Now, that was about 5 months ago when I made that short episode. But the more I get into the world of D.B. Cooper, the Cooper vortex, if you will, I have found that less and less begins to make sense. I've said this many times on Cooper Friday. The case should have been solved. It seems like there should have been some type of greater effort to solve the Cooper skyjacking. It's shocking that he didn't get captured already, based on how much physical evidence was left behind. And one possible explanation that I said during the Ted Braden episode here on BBOR was this a CIA cover-up? Because with the D.B. Cooper suspect like Ted Braden, He was also a CIA operative, and the story is that he more or less became a mercenary in Africa, and he was then given a honorable discharge even for leaving Vietnam and going to Africa, but he still received an honorable discharge in exchange for not revealing certain secrets of the CIA and so on. And I was like, maybe, just maybe, is this the type of person that they would cover up for? Or even something larger, somebody who was put there to test the airport security and regulations at the time, and somebody like E. Howard Hunt would fit into all of those categories, somebody who was doing this to further an agenda of the CIA. Now, you could be like, okay, well, the CIA covered it up because he had a James Bond complex, or you could view it in a way that it was all designed because he was an operative and they wanted to put in more security regulations and so on. But I'm going to go over to the D.B. Cooper Suspect WordPress, and I'm going to go through a brief rundown of the D.B. Cooper Suspect E. Howard Hunt. His birth name was Everett Howard Hunt, Jr., and he was an American intelligence officer and author. From 1949 to 1970, Hunt served as an officer in the CIA, particularly in the United States, with involvement in regime change in Latin America, and also the 1954 Guatemalan coup d'etat and the 1961 Bay of Pigs invasion. Along with G. Gordon Liddy, Frank Sturgis, and others, Hunt was one of the Nixon administration plumbers, a team of operatives charged with identifying government sources of national security information or leaks to outside parties. Hunt and Liddy plotted the Watergate burglaries and other clandestine operations for the Nixon administration. In the ensuing Watergate scandal, Hunt was convicted of burglary, conspiracy, and wiretapping, and eventually sentenced to 33 months in prison. And a lot of people were pulled into jail because of their activities in the Nixon administration. The famous thing that gets talked about a lot in conspiracy theory circles is that John Mitchell, the Attorney General, was the first Attorney General to go to jail. G. Gordon Liddy, however, maybe has a more famous place in history, and it's the quotation, "To overcome your fear, you must engage in it." That's what I think about every time I see the name G. Gordon Liddy. After release, E. Howard Hunt lived in Mexico and then Florida until his death. The strength for him being D.B. Cooper is, as previously stated, he looks a lot like the Bing Crosby sketch, or as I call it, Composite A on this channel, not just that I call it, Composite A. He does strongly resemble that, and again, credit to Dave, I think that that is a fair observation. He would have been comfortable pulling off a high-risk operation such as this, comfortable with high-risk actions, if he feels the best interest of the nation. The Guatemalan coup, the Bay of Pigs, and the Watergate burglaries, and even the Kennedy assassination, alleged by family members, are all examples. E. Howard Hunt wrote spy novels and appeared to have a James Bond complex. And, I can comprehend that. But, I guess we're going through the strains first before I say any pushback. Being in the CIA during the Air America campaign in Vietnam, Hunt may have had detailed knowledge of the aft stairs that could be opened mid-flight. E. Howard Hunt served in the OSS in World War II, where not only did he learn to parachute at night, and probably while wearing a business suit, but who bragged in one of his memoirs about easily making his qualifying jumps, and who parachuted into China during World War II. In addition, he supervised parachute training for others, obtained aviation knowledge while serving in the Army Air Corps in World War II. So this guy is ex-OSS, Army Air Corps, had similar MOs to in other endeavors, performing risky crimes on holiday weekends to give him time to return to his civilian life. D.B. Cooper, of course, committed the skyjacking the day before Thanksgiving. Experienced laundering money in foreign countries. His job for Nixon during the spring of 1972 involved this. According to his son, he withdrew somewhere between $100,000 and $200,000 from a safe deposit box after the final Watergate break-in. He and his 17-year-old son subsequently hid it in the home's air duct. The weaknesses, while not yet famous and infamous, still occupied a relatively higher profile than one would expect for someone who would commit such a crime. And I have to 100% agree with that. At first. On Black Box Online Radio, I often share with you my journey through the information, and I was thinking that the entire time when I learned about E. Howard Hunt as a D.B. Cooper suspect, I was just thinking, somebody who has this type of high-profile position, the fact that he is working in the Nixon administration period, and then he's just going to go on to become some type of skyjacker, risking everything, could have compromised countless other operations that are going on, let alone the fact that he could have just completely destroyed himself and he could have gone to jail for something else. Now, did he have information that he could use to blackmail or something? All right, now I'm already making excuses. But the fact of the matter is, I found this to be completely surprising. And it's difficult to imagine that after Hunt became infamous, one of the witnesses would not have alerted the FBI. Now, this is an even bigger point. I had heard about E. Howard Hunt before the D.B. Cooper mystery. I did an episode about him on Black Box Online Radio, which you can listen to if you want to hear the book discussion on Bond of Secrecy. Lots of people talk about E. Howard Hunt in discussions in relation to the CIA. Nobody from the plane recognized him. No one saw him on TV and was like, oh my goodness, that's D.B. Cooper. So you would think that someone with his amount of exposure would have a higher chance of being recognized. And this will bring us to the next point, and it's going to be somewhere in the middle. You heard some of the pros, and you heard some of the cons. And there's a book out that explores E. Howard Hunt's possible involvement in the D.B. Cooper case called D.B. Cooper Examined, Identified, and Exposed by Nat LeFouque. And this is one where he is going to more or less talk about a lot of the myths in the D.B. Cooper case. He's trying to set the record straight. And also, he is going to make the case that E. Howard Hunt could have been D.B. Cooper. Before I buy a true crime book, I often like to pull up a free sample from Kindle, and I like to just read through it a little bit. And firstly, it was better than I thought. It was more well-written than I expected, so full credit goes to Nat LeFouque, and I'll talk about it in just a second, but I would like to remind you that if you want to follow along with these Cooper Friday episodes, you can hit the like button and subscribe. It really helps out the channel, and if there are any D.B. Cooper suspects or aspects of the D.B. Cooper case or any other books that you would like discussed here on Cooper Friday, you can put your ideas in the comments section down below, or you can be like Dave and send it to the Black Box Online Radio Facebook page. I also have Black Box Online Radio at AOL.com. That's a good website, email address to use when you want to send larger things like attachments. And you can go through some of the links in the description box. One of them is for buymeacoffee.com. Buymeacoffee.com/blackboxned88 allows you to make a donation or contribution to help support the show. And anybody who makes a donation will get a shout out on Zodiac Monday. But as far as the book D.B. Cooper Examined, Identified, and Exposed goes, Nat LeFouque begins by saying that people have a lot of preconceived ideas about D.B. Cooper. People are just accepting that D.B. Cooper could not have possibly been somebody who was a high-profile individual such as E. Howard Hunt. People are insisting that D.B. Cooper had to have been some type of average Joe who just really needed money and concocted this plan as a way to, get $200,000, that it just has to be some guy who was not very prominent. And I really liked the introductory presentation of just saying, why? I mean, why on earth would we limit ourselves to that type of belief system? And you heard Dave's email when he just said that E. Howard Hunt seems like an outlandish suspect. Nat LeFouque writes in the book that, yeah, he thought the same thing. He thought that E. Howard Hunt would have been an outlandish suspect, but then he began to find pieces of evidence that would fall into place. Now, I appreciate the open-mindedness. I really do. I mean, I'm somebody who talks about all different types of true crime theories here on Black Box Online Radio in relation to D.B. Cooper, the Zodiac Killer, Jack the Ripper, but sometimes we have to just realize that with suspect profiles, you can make things fit. There are going to be supporting points. Because, military background, CIA background, he had trained for with paratrooping, and he was extremely familiar with high-risk situations. Lots of D.B. Cooper suspects would have had these qualities. Lots of D.B. Cooper suspects would have had these pros. Although I do confess that E. Howard Hunt's list is rather large. Military paratrooping, trained to jump at night, and he may have even trained to jump in the suit and tie. But as far as myths and conceptions that people have about the D.B. Cooper case that are discussed in the book D.B. Cooper Examined, Identified, and Exposed, Nat LeFouque brings up the point that there was a tie left behind on the plane. after D.B. Cooper parachuted into the night, there was a tie that was left behind, and he proposed that, well, how do we truly know that that's D.B. Cooper's tie? I should have said he's asking the question rather than proposing. How do we truly know that that was D.B. Cooper's tie? Did he own that personally? Did he bring it with him to throw off the authorities? Did he just bring a tie that wasn't his own personal belongings and left it behind as a distraction? I mean, if I were to ever skyjack a plane and I knew that I could get away with it the way that Cooper did, I probably would do something similar as well. Now, I mean, obviously, I can't predict the future and know I would get away with it, but I mean, he's just asking those questions. And other people have brought this up in the comment section, and even Eric Eulis has talked about this. I mean, but like the stuff that you guys were saying in the comment section was, number one, he could have borrowed the tie from somebody, he could have purchased it at a secondhand thrift store. That's one that comes up a lot. He could have taken the tie from somebody else's wardrobe when he was a visitor in their house, stolen it. Countless explanations. So the fact of the matter is, was that truly his tie? We don't necessarily know, but what Nat LeFouc is trying to do is to say that these assumptions that people have, or these beliefs that people have about D.B. Cooper are just that, beliefs. They accept certain things to be true without necessarily being able to accept the possibility that there could be alternative explanations. And the biggest one that he's zoning in on is that D.B. Cooper would have been a prominent individual, wouldn't be someone desperate for money, but rather somebody who was doing this for the thrill of it, someone who was doing this because he wanted to act like James Bond. Now, there's another point in the book, D.B. Cooper Examined, Identified, and Exposed, when Nat LeFouc is saying that there is another misconception that people have that the money that D.B. Cooper had, the $200,000, was taken from different banks and was put together, and they photocopied and made notes of all the serial numbers, and then money was never seen in circulation again. And he says that this is untrue. The money was taken from a single bank that had $200,000 put aside, which I can only expect would be somewhere in a vault. I mean, I can only expect. And that $200,000 had already been recorded. That's how they know that the money never went back into circulation. It was a precautionary measure that was taken by the bank. And that, I mean, I don't think that has any relevance at all for E. Howard Hunt being D.B. Cooper. And I know it's important to state the facts. I know it's important to get the narrative right. But in terms of making a case for E. Howard Hunt, or a case for or against any suspect, I don't think that that has any real importance or significance. Okay, the money didn't come from multiple banks. It came from a single bank. And I think the point that Nat LeFouc was trying to get at was D.B. Cooper seemed to have known that he was going to a city that could have provided him with $200,000 because he knew that it was in the bank. I think that's where he was going with it, but I mean, I don't necessarily think that there's any evidence to support that. It's almost just like, okay, your statement is accurate, but I don't comprehend the relevance of it yet. And if anybody wants to dispute that with me, you can put your idea in the comment section down below and discuss that. The next point, though, is something that I was actually just listening to on the show Star Talk that's hosted by Neil deGrasse Tyson prior to the start of this recording. And that is that sometimes people have a far out and outlandish idea, and it turns out to be accurate. When you got people like Einstein talking about the curvature of space-time, it just sounded like it was completely wrong at the time. But through the process of investigation, people learned that it was actually an accurate statement. So I just felt that that video coincidentally coincided with the stuff that I was reading about D.B. Cooper in Examined, Identified, and Exposed, because we shouldn't limit ourselves to a single type of D.B. Cooper behavior or personality type or occupation. And in all seriousness, I don't think that the entirety of people who follow the D.B. Cooper mystery do that, because there are D.B. Cooper suspects all up and down the spectrum. You have people like Kenny Christensen, who was just a flight attendant, who maybe had a problem with the airline. You have people like Joe Lakich, who may have planned the D.B. Cooper heist as a revenge plot against the FBI, as well as just his own frustrations dealing with the murder of his daughter in the 58 November skyjacking. You might have some people like Ted Braden, who actually was a CIA operative, E. Howard Hunt, who was with the CIA and the OSS and the Army Air Corps, And I guess I'm just going to get to the heart of the issue and tell you guys what I really think. I want to explore this possibility more of D.B. Cooper being some type of conspirator, that this is possibly a cover-up. And I often do this with these unsolved mysteries, and I've been talking to you about it on Cooper Friday because, to me, that provides such a large explanation as to how this makes sense, that Cooper was somebody who was an operative, working for someone, the CIA or the FBI, and it was all done by design. Maybe it was done to test airport security, maybe it was done on his own volition, and then they just covered it up and used it as an excuse to pass security and safety measures. So those are just some things to think about, because when you look at the other skyjackings, like, say, for example, the one involving Richard McCoy, then, well, that would be like an example of a skyjacker who was caught and apprehended, and, like, he was able to go through with part of the skyjacking, wasn't able to completely get away. It seems like D.B. Cooper vanished off the face of the earth. Now, some of you guys in the comment section have been proposing something even larger than that, even bigger than D.B. Cooper being a conspirator, saying that they don't think he ever jumped from the plane. They didn't find the parachute. They didn't find D.B. Cooper's remains. They didn't find the entirety of the money. They found the 3 stacks of bills at Tina Bar, but they didn't find the entirety of the money. And some people were writing into the comment section saying that they don't think that D.B. Cooper ever jumped. And I was like, well, then what would have happened to him? I mean, was this some type of CIA cover-up where they just swore the crew to secrecy, that D.B. Cooper never got off the plane? Was he just kind of sitting in the lavatory or something waiting for the signal, and then the CIA took him to a safe house? I mean, that stuff's a little bit intense. I mean, and again, that seems outlandish, but the issue with true crime is, at the end of the day, we have to look at what actually happened. What was the truth? Not just simply, okay, well, this doesn't make sense to me, so I'm going to dismiss it. Let's talk about some other points, though, involving E. Howard Hunt as a D.B. Cooper suspect. One of them is something that was explored in the documentary The Skyjacker That Got Away, which I actually discussed in the very first Cooper Friday episode, and that is that somebody thought that it was rather weird that D.B. Cooper called in for ransom. He called in the ransom of $200,000, yet he did not request $100 bills. So they brought him the money in 20s, and that would have added about 15 pounds of weight, and that an experienced paratrooper or skydiver would probably have had the awareness that adding 15 pounds of weight would make things a lot more difficult. And you might be thinking, well, an experienced jumper like E. Howard Hunt, maybe he didn't care about 15 extra pounds of weight. But this is about awareness. I mean, he wouldn't have had to do that. Why make the job more difficult when he could have requested hundreds? But, I mean, that's just something that would be a strike against him. Another point that was brought up about E. Howard Hunt as a D.B. Cooper suspect is that he spent time in Europe, and the Dan Cooper comics were popular in Europe, and the ones that I've shared here on Black Box Online Radio feature French titles and German titles. And yes, Dan Cooper was a comic book character, and the person got on the plane using the alias Dan Cooper, and then the media mistakenly called him D.B. Cooper, although D.B. Cooper has a much better ring to it. I don't think that that's a solid point at all. It means nothing. Oh, someone's spending time in Europe and there are Dan Cooper comics in Europe? No, means nothing to me, because there are other explanations out there, such as Milton Vordahl had a grudge against somebody named Don Cooper, and you can find all types of explanations that might even make a little bit more sense, so I'm not impressed with that. Now, here's something else, though, to think about, and that is that E. Howard Hunt probably had a very high understanding of aviation and airplanes, and I have said multiple times here on these Cooper Friday episodes that I don't think that D.B. Cooper was a layperson when it came to aviation. Now, does that mean that he was ex-OSS and ex-Army Air Corps, and he was jumping into China, and he trained to jump in a suit and tie? No, I mean, that doesn't prove anything. I just think that D.B. Cooper's instructions seem so clear, like he knew exactly what he was doing, ordering the plane to fly at 10,000 feet, knowing that the aft stairs could be lowered without cockpit override. Now, somebody like E. Howard Hunt, they propose would have been aware of all this because of his military training, and as well as perhaps exposure to the Boeing design because of working with the CIA, because of being someone who was more or less a CIA spy. He would have known these types of details. He would have been able to implement this type of knowledge. Now, you may have noticed one thing here on this Cooper Friday segment, and that is that I seem to be putting the arguments for E. Howard Hunt being D.B. Cooper in the concept of two theories that are stitched together. And that is that, number one, okay, this guy could have been D.B. Cooper, and he did it on his own, and then the CIA covered it up, and then number two, he was D.B. Cooper because the CIA wanted to test this out as some type of operation. This was something that they were doing on their own. So which one really is it? Which one would I go with? I mean, of course we don't have the evidence to say that the CIA planned this. I get curious about that. I am suspicious of that. So I would have to go with the first and just say one man on the plane, D.B. Cooper set this whole thing up. And even though at first, like many, like Dave thought, like Nat LaFook thought, this sounds outlandish, this sounds crazy, it sounds absolutely impossible, then I got under the surface, and there are some strong points for E. Howard Hunt as a D.B. Cooper suspect. But the bigger points are weaknesses. Most likely he would have been recognized by someone. He had way too much to risk. It seems unlikely, but we should accept the truth no matter what it is if we do learn D.B. Cooper's identity. Well, that will be all for me now. You can put your ideas in the comment section down below. What do you think about E. Howard Hunt as a D.B. Cooper suspect? What do you think about any of the points that I've made in this episode? What do you think about any of the sources that I've been talking about? Is there a book about D.B. Cooper that you would recommend? Is there a suspect you want to hear about? Is there anything Cooper related that you would like discussed? And one more time, you can hit the like button and subscribe if you want, but please put something in the comment section down below so we can continue the discussion. Anybody can write the show at blackboxonlineradio@AOL.com. You can also get me on Facebook. My personal Facebook is in the description box. And there was always BlackBoxNet88 over on Instagram, and I'll see you over there. Until next time.